The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yesterday, as I prepared to do my show, I had an entire piece of equipment, one of my core pieces of equipment, just blow out on me, just all of a sudden. And I guess I can't be too mad. I got a good 4 years out of that mixer, but it was at the most inopportune time. So that's why I could not get the show out to you yesterday. So today, because I love you guys so much, I'm going to give you probably 45 minutes to an hour's worth of a show, not to make up for yesterday, but there's so many news stories that I absolutely just have to cover. And you can help support the replacement of this gear by becoming a patron. Yes, you too can help maintain the Benjamin Dixon Show and all the other projects that I'm coordinating by going to patreon.com/the BPD show. The only way I was possible to get this show out to you today was because of patrons. So help become a patron. Let's talk about the news.
Some of you wonder why I can't just do the normal politician thing, and which is to run and then retire after the election. That is what I'm told is the politically shrewd thing to do. I considered that. But just as my conscience is what got me to take this job in the first place, my conscience could not handle going out that way.
Paul Ryan is resigning at the end of his term. The coward is cashing out. I love that straw man he started with. Some of you are wondering why I won't do just the regular politician thing. No one is wondering why you wouldn't run and then retire. And is that even a normal politician thing? I don't really know many politicians who intend on retiring immediately after they run, but I digress. Paul Ryan, who people are still calling a fiscal hawk, the man who's leaving us with probably the largest deficits that we've seen in a generation, the man who is obsessed with harming. You know what? I knew this was a good thing. I'm just glad to see him go. I know that he's going to make a boatload of money in the private sector, and I think that that's why he's going. But I don't know of any other politician that has the fantasies of harming working class Americans like Paul Ryan. This is a reason to celebrate. This is a great day. Or yesterday was a great day. Like I said, the show crashed yesterday. But besides the point, this is still day 2 of a great series of days with the resignation or the impending resignation of Paul Ryan. And I guess you can't technically call it a resignation. He's just not running again. Same difference. But he's cashing out. I firmly believe that Paul Ryan is going to be taking a job in the private sector that's going to help him maximize the tax breaks that he just helped pass and that Donald Trump signed into law. He can't maximize those dollars. I mean, he's a wealthy guy now, but you know that this guy is going to command upwards of a $5 to $10 million, if not more, a year salary. And then think about all of that he gets to keep because of the tax breaks that he just got on the books. Now, they're saying that he's frustrated with Donald Trump, and that's the coward part, right? He's not frustrated with Donald Trump's policies. He's frustrated with Donald Trump's behavior. And this is a key thing, right? There are people who 100% will resist Donald Trump because of his behavior, but have absolutely no problem with his policies. And so it boggles the mind to see people on the liberal side of the equation willing to embrace someone like Anna Navarro, who on yesterday commended Paul Ryan for being, a good-hearted guy on Twitter. This is what she tweeted. And, but Paul Ryan has aided and abetted Donald Trump, the person that she's ostensibly resisting. And so there are plenty of people, take Jeff Flake, for example, people who would oppose Donald Trump because of his behavior and his demeanor, but have absolutely no problem with the policies that he's instituting that are going to hurt the most vulnerable people in this country. So that millionaires and billionaires can save a few more dollars that they don't even really need, that they're not going to even increase their consumption, right? This is why trickle-down economics never works. It's not as though wealthy people who are consuming as much as they possibly can consume or even desire to consume. It's not as though if you put money into their hands that they're going to stimulate the economy. It's never worked. It has never worked. And this is why Jenna Johnson from the Washington Post on Twitter yesterday, she pointed out, quote, hours after Paul Ryan announced his retirement, the Treasury reported collecting nearly $600 billion less than it spent in the first half of the fiscal year, an imbalance that swelled 14% over the same period the year before. So we have a 14% increase in the deficit for the first half of the fiscal year, thanks to this fiscal conservative, right? Quote unquote, fiscal conservative Paul Ryan. But don't let the door hit you. The flip side of it is that he's a coward in the sense that he will not stand up to Donald Trump. Yes, but more importantly, something's going to happen in 2018 that he does not want to be around for. He doesn't want to be here to have to give the gavel back to whatever Democrat, possibly Nancy Pelosi, is going to be the Speaker of the House in a year that the imbalance, the number of seats that the Republicans had, made it almost an impossibility for Democrats to take the House back. But now, because of Donald Trump's behavior, Donald Trump's demeanor, his oafishness, and because of bad policies from Donald Trump and the Republican Party, and because of the cowardice of the Republican Party not willing to stand up to their own leader, it's a possibility that the Democrats are going to take the House back in 2018. It's a strong possibility. And Paul Ryan himself was facing a really tough challenge. The Democratic primary isn't over yet. They're in Wisconsin's 1st district, but it's a possibility that it's going to be Randy Bryce, who has had an amazing campaign so far against Paul Ryan. And this is his chance for a victory lap because now Paul Ryan is stepping down. This is the best thing that's happened to our democracy. I was reading on Twitter this morning. Someone tweeted out that this is the best thing that Paul Ryan has done for women in the last 19 years is to step down. So good riddance. Go let him make his money. He's going to do fine because this is our system rewards people like him. I mean, the private sector is waiting to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into this guy. Like, he's in the top 1% now, but he's going to very soon be in the top 1% of 1%. Fox News covered it, of course, and this is one of the opening line in their coverage. Paul Ryan is one of those rare politicians who really does want to spend more time with his family. Seriously? I mean, that's what we're going to go with, Fox News. That's akin to Tucker Carlson covering the Panda Gate, on the same day that the FBI was raiding Michael Cohen's office. But, I mean, that's no surprise. Here's the interesting take that is worth a discussion. It reveals the extent to which the Republican Party, or rather the Democratic Party, the resistance, is willing to go in order to oppose Donald Trump. This is from the editorial board of the New York Times. It's entitled Saving Paul Ryan, a cornball play on the movie Saving Private Ryan. They use several paragraphs to explain why Paul Ryan should use his remaining time as Speaker of the House to do some key things. And some of the things they want him to do are downright disturbing. But at the center of it all is their desire for Paul Ryan to oppose Donald Trump. And they said, but setting aside those lost causes. Now, that's a big sentence, because before that, they say all of the things that they disagree with Paul Ryan on, from Planned Parenthood to the tax bill to all these critical policy issues that really are at the core of what's plaguing the country right now. But they said, the New York Times editorial board said, yeah, setting all that aside, those are lost causes. And then they said, quote, step up. Exercise Congress's constitutional responsibility to authorize the use of force in places like Syria. Really? I'm going to do an entire segment on Syria, so we'll come back to that. But holy hell, New York Times. I mean, we know who you are. But really? That's the number one thing that you want Paul Ryan to do with the rest of his time? And then they said, have House committees hold hearings on the conflicts of interest that pervade the Trump administration. Seriously? That's okay. Demand that the president release his tax returns. And then get outraged when Mr. Trump tosses aside ethical practices like releasing the logs of the visitors to the White House until the administration was sued. And speak out forcefully when the president insults or attacks minorities, women, or anybody else less privileged than him. You're only 48. I'm reading still from the New York Times. You're only 48 years old and you have a long career ahead of you. But how you handle Donald Trump will surely decide how history sees you. So go out in style, Mr. Ryan. You would be doing the country and your party a service. This is madness. This is pure madness, what they're advocating for and what they're not advocating for. And the entire premise of it all, the fact that they would think that a sociopath like Paul Ryan is someone with whom they can make any type of alliance with in order to fight Donald Trump. To me, Paul Ryan is far more dangerous, saving the possibility of nuclear war, right? I'll give you that. But Paul Ryan is in his position as Speaker of the House and his ability to move legislation through the House and influence the Senate. And then Donald Trump being willing to sign anything that comes across his desk. Paul Ryan is far more dangerous than Donald Trump. Adam Johnson, friend of the show, this is what he had to say about it on Twitter. He said, quote, "Liberals' silence of the lamb approach to politics, where they try to use a serial killer to catch an even worse serial killer, where they try to get a slightly sort of less evil Republican to attack Trump, is not a sustainable model of resistance, in my opinion." And I would argue the only thing I would say differently is that actually Paul Ryan is more evil than Trump, because Paul Ryan sits around and fantasizes of all the different ways he can take from the most marginalized people in this country. Donald Trump is just trying to figure out how he's going to get laid without getting embarrassed in front of the entire world. And he's just trying to figure out how he can outdo Barack Obama. That's the only difference between the two of them, because on everything else they agree. America is so much better off without Paul Ryan. And if the resistance was about anything, if they had any real thing that they stood for versus just standing against Trump, then they would realize that Paul Ryan is actually just as bad, if not worse, than Donald Trump. And they would never seek an alliance with him, just like they shouldn't seek an alliance with George W. Bush, just like so many other Republicans who have the exact same policy positions as Donald Trump. They just do it with a nice smile.
Schools across Oklahoma have been closed for 9 days and counting. Teachers are rallying at the state capitol. They want more school funding. A deal with lawmakers could be close, but until then, many teachers will not go back to their classrooms.
We saw it in West Virginia earlier this year, and now we're seeing it in Oklahoma. Teachers are not having it. They're saying enough is enough. There are videos, viral videos going around the internet showing you just how horribly teachers are funded, are underfunded. You see the books that the students have to live with. I think there was a book that someone was proud to say that this book was owned by Blake Shelton, the country singer who was a host on The Voice back in the 80s. A kid today has a book from Blake Shelton. You know, I mean, it's a cool thing if you found it in a library or in a trash dump, but not in the classroom that you're currently using and trying to learn from. And these are conditions that we see around the country. And so to have Oklahoma following suit from West Virginia, striking and demanding better funding is something that we all should get behind every time it happens. Because one thing I can tell you firsthand, any teacher, anyone who's ever taught can tell you, teachers don't make enough and their classrooms aren't funded enough. And there's a concerted effort to take funding from these schools that are already in desperate conditions. There's a concerted effort to take funding from those schools and give it to private schools, or to private schools and charter schools. There is a post on Facebook from Savannah Hillerman in Oklahoma that goes to just demonstrate just how valuable or how invaluable teachers are. Even in Oklahoma, in the midst of their strike, there are teachers who are going door to door, not asking for donations for their strike, not asking for anything. They're going door to door to make sure that their students are taken care of. So while the majority of teachers are in the city, the state's capital, The remaining teachers are there to take care of students, to make sure that students who may not have everything that they need because they would get it from school and would otherwise not have like lunch. Teachers are going around just like we saw in West Virginia. Teachers are so critical to everything that we have in this society, and yet it is one of the most undervalued professions in this country. And I'm so excited about the fact that it's a spiraling effect. Right. Politico.com is reporting on how this protest or how this strike walkout actually came into being. And this is what they said, quote, "So while West Virginia teachers were still on their picket lines, teachers decided it was time for this state to follow suit, the state of Oklahoma." One of the organizers, Morijan, created a Facebook group called Oklahoma Teacher Walkout. The time is now. And in just 3 days, the group swelled to 30,000 members. On March 8th, the union laid out a list of demands like a $10,000 raise for teachers and $200 million to make up for the education funding cuts, threatening a massive school walkout on April 2nd if they weren't met. On March 31st, the legislature approved a $6,100 raise, but it wasn't enough, and the walkout was called. On the third day of the walkout, the reporter stood next to the organizer near the Capitol steps, where grateful teachers took selfies with him and asked him how long it could last. I mean, it's not as simple. I wanted to say we have not because we ask not, a religious phrase. But the reality of it is we have not because we demand not. We have to demand the things that we want to see happen in this society. And these teachers took notes from West Virginia, and now they're taking it to Oklahoma. And I dare say that this needs to spread all across the country, because in every state, there is a gross amount of underfunding of classrooms, of teachers. And considering the important role that they play in our society, we should not only get behind Oklahoma like we got behind West Virginia, but we should get behind them every single state in this country. Every single time they need to get a concession, every single time they need a raise, every time they need a walkout, we need to get behind them and do whatever it is that we can do from where we are to support them. Let's talk about Syria again for a moment. We've been covering it for some time. I've been covering it at least 2-3 years. And one of the interesting thing about what's going on in Syria is the reality that there is no solution to the problem there. Right? You do have a murderous dictator by the name of Bashar al-Assad who is killing his own people. Not just in a civil war in which that happens, but he's killing innocent civilians and children. You do have a quote unquote opposition rebellion that is jihadist, that would bring a non-secular government into power if they were to defeat Bashar al-Assad. There is no quote unquote good side there. Assad is backed by Russia and Iran. He's not going anywhere. The United States has no authority to be there. The United States has no authority to attack them or to bomb them, even if you want to call it, even if you are under the delusion that it would be for humanitarian purposes. And President Obama said as much last year, or 2 years ago, in an interview with Jake Tapper. And I want to play that because I think far too many people on the left have a misconception about how sober those of us who don't agree with them on every detail in Syria are about the realities of what's happening in Syria.
In Syria, there is not a scenario in which, absent us deploying large numbers of troops, we can stop a civil war in which both sides are deeply dug in. There have been critics of mine that have suggested that, well, if early enough you had provided sufficient support to a moderate opposition, they might have been able to overthrow the murderous Assad regime. The problem with that is, as we've seen, that Assad regime is supported by Russia. It's supported by Iran. Because they have not threatened us directly, we would have been violating international law, as it's understood to just go in there and invade. And unless we were willing to sustain a large presence there and escalate if and when Russia or Iran got involved, then we were going to be in a situation where at some point the situation would collapse, except we would have a bunch of folks on the ground and be very much overextended.
So the situation that Donald Trump is facing today is not much different than what Barack Obama faced years ago, about 2 years ago. And yet it seems to be that many people on the left think that those of us who don't agree with 100% pacifism are bloodthirsty for an interventionist war and a regime change war in Syria. No, that's not the case. There is no good solution in Syria. I remember I did a show for The Intercept about 2 years ago where I literally said that exact thing. There is no solution in Syria. There's definitely not a solution that the United States can foster. And so we are in a situation where we honestly almost have to sit on our hands and watch as Bashar al-Assad kills his people and as the jihadi extremist rebels, there are no moderate rebels, at least not anymore, as they continue to kill people. And what infuriates me is this necessity for them to, okay, you have people who honestly believe that there should be no intervention under any circumstances. They make that argument. It doesn't matter what atrocities are happening, that we should just accept their refugees and let the atrocity happen. There are quite a few people who honestly believe that that is a cogent foreign policy. And that is a progressive foreign policy. I vehemently disagree with that. There are times that you have to get involved, and there are times where you should get involved, but there's really nothing that you could do about it. There's nothing that you could do but make it worse. And Syria is that case. Anything that we do in Syria is going to make the situation worse. You take down Assad, you have a jihadist regime. You have a non-secular regime, right? Because there are no moderate rebels. You leave Assad in place, well, you pretty much sign off on another brutal dictator, which is wouldn't be the first time the United States has done that. But the point is that to say that the approach that the United States or any country, any nation, or any individual, anyone with a progressive outlook on the world should take is absolutely non-interventionist and to the point of pacifism, even in the face of atrocities, that is something that I disagree with. And we have this conversation with regard to Syria only because we have the appearance of atrocities, unconfirmed gas attacks. And I say unconfirmed because they are unconfirmed. Russia prevented the UN from investigating. And so we have no way of confirming it. But we have the appearance of atrocities that are plastered across our television screens all day, every day. The corporate media is insisting. You saw what we read from the New York Times that Congress authorized a use of military force. So they're ready to go to war because it's good for business. And yet in the midst of it, we have a quagmire that I don't think we've seen in modern history, in which there's literally nothing that can be done except the two sides realize that they are destroying their country and killing all of their people. And then eventually there will be nothing left for them to fight for. That is the same solution that Barack Obama mentioned 2 years ago. Same thing that I mentioned 2 years ago. And that's just the sad reality of Syria. They're going to have to burn each other to the ground and realize that there's nothing left for them to fight over. And that's going to happen in the due course of time. So setting Syria aside, I want to make a clear delineation between discussing Syria and intervention in Syria from the next conversation, because there is no intervention that can fix anything except it will make everything worse in Syria. But there are underlying arguments that are developing as a result of Syria that I feel betray anyone who's genuinely anti-war. I've told this story before, and I would tell it again very briefly. I got into all of this because I was am anti-war. I got into it because I wanted to figure out how the hell do we stop all of these wars. I went to get my master's degree in political science and international relations because I wanted to understand the nature and the causes of war. And I went in just as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as any pacifist, saying that America empire is the reason for everything. And the moment you actually start studying the nature and the causes of the war, then you understand war has existed. This is pretty obvious. You don't even have to study to understand this. War existed before the United States existed, and it will exist after the end of the United States. And so if your only solution to everything, even in this present moment, is that America just stay out of it and everything else will fix itself, then you are genuinely betraying a true anti-war movement. Because without institutions being built and without theories being crafted and being forwarded and argued in a very sufficient manner, and by sufficient, I mean in a manner that can compete with everything else that the war machine is pushing on us, without us fully developing our ideas for ending war, then we're not actually being anti-war. We're being just religious zealots who are shouting cliches that get us clicks. And yes, American imperialism is a part of the equation. Yes, capitalism is a part of the equation. But we have found reasons to go to war before capitalism even existed. More specifically, if your analysis of war, if your analysis of your theories, your anti-war theories, if they begin and end with blame America, and if they are as incomplete as all America has to do is stop creating war and there would be no more war, you're not advancing the movement. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just speaking out of frustration here, but answer me this. What good is it to just shout to the top of your lungs that America needs to stop imperialist wars when we have no path whatsoever to actually stopping them? Without electoral power, we're never going to change any of these things. We have to get electoral power. And even with electoral power, we have to create institutions to start changing the grip, the stranglehold that the military industrial complex has on the United States. We have so many miles to go, and we get comfortable, in my opinion, we get comfortable with just shouting the cliches of being anti-war without even going into an analysis of how we prevent war or to the underlying reasons for war beyond American imperialism. I mean, if we're not talking about the anarchical nature of our international order, are we really even serious about ending war? I know without a shadow of a doubt that stopping our analysis of war, or stopping our critique and our analysis at American imperialism and believing that all America has to do is just step off the stage and everything else will fix itself. This is how we've reduced it. We've reduced it in every situation around the world. We've reduced it to American imperialism. And that's insufficient. I just know without a doubt that we'll never actually make progress towards ending war if our analysis for ending war ends at American imperialism, because war existed before and it will exist afterwards. Maybe we should rename what's happening now to not being the anti-war movement, but just being an anti-American imperialist movement. That would make sense. And in that way, I would say you probably are spot on. But if you got into this like I did to end war, then that's insufficient, because the problem is bigger than America, even if the problem right now is America. Whew, I just didn't expect to go that deep in the middle of the show. We're just getting started good. A couple of more segments to go. But before we go any further, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and help us spread the word, help us grow, help us to do all the things we need to do. Become a patron today. www.patreon.com/the BPD show. We are building the studio. It's not finished yet. we haven't even met our goal yet. But we're taking the money that people have already sent, and we've gotten the location, and we're starting to build it out. And so you should be a part of that, so that you could look at our next video and say, I helped do that. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. All right, let's go on with the news. The Associated Press is reporting that the Trump administration is considering a plan that would allow states to require certain food stamp recipients to undergo drug testing, handing a win to conservatives who've long sought ways to curb the safety net program. The AP went on to report, quote, "The drug testing proposal is another step in the Trump administration's push to allow states more flexibility in how they implement federal programs that serve the poor, unemployed, or uninsured. It also wants to allow states to tighten work requirements for food stamp recipients and has found support among GOP governors who argue greater state control saves money and reduces dependency." And of course, the featured image that they have is none other than Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin. File this under exactly what I said at the beginning of the show. Republicans have only one problem with Donald Trump, and that is his oafishness and his lack of decorum. But in terms of policy, they are in lockstep with the man. They absolutely love the things that he's willing to let them do to the poorest among us, to the most marginalized groups. Now, Florida, the state of Florida did this before. They drug tested people who were receiving safety net, food stamps, and different programs. And they found that it actually was really just a giveaway to drug testing companies. Governor Rick Scott, who actually had share in some of those companies, they only found that only 3% of all welfare recipients tested positive for any type of drugs whatsoever, including marijuana. Yet this is something that it increases the punitive nature of being someone in need in the United States of America. It creates another hurdle, another expense, and another barrier to getting anything from the United States. And they're even trying to apply this to unemployment. Never mind the fact that we are paying our taxes into the system in order to be able to get these types of things. Never mind the fact that even if they took all the funding away from these programs, it would not cover the deficits that they claim to care about. Never mind the fact that the deficits have been exacerbated by their own programs, by their increase in the military spending, by their cut in taxes and their tax giveaway and their tax scam. Never mind that they are creating the problem. Their solution is not even a solution, but it's not about providing solutions. It's not even about smoking out those people who happen to smoke a little weed every now and then. It's about a transfer of wealth, yet another transfer of wealth from the poorest people among us to the wealthiest people, to corporations. Because guess who has to pay for these drug tests? So this is what it boils down to. Number one, it's just another way of embarrassing people who actually need something from the government, so that it would discourage them from asking for anything from the government. Never mind the fact that they have probably already paid into the government. And then number two, it's a transfer of wealth. It's a transfer of wealth from the poorest people in America to the wealthiest people in America. And I could speak about how much Republicans hate the working class, how much they would love indentured servitude, how much they would rather, we all be serfs. They would rather a feudal society where the wealthiest people in the society have absolute control over the lives of the poorest people. We could discuss that, but that's nothing new. That's something that we should expect. And we're not even, the thing that blows me away is we're not even talking about money that amounts to much of anything. These programs are marginal. These programs are so small that even just a small fraction of the military budget could take care of these programs and improve these programs. But they make it seem as though these programs are the biggest problem that we're facing, when in actuality it's basically a pittance in comparison to the other things that we spend on. We have to shift the priorities in America, and we have to do that by shifting the perception of who actually needs safety nets in this country. And because we've created a stigma around poverty, most people who are in need of these safety nets don't really want to admit that they need these safety nets. I've been on unemployment. I mean, how many of you have been on unemployment? I grew up on welfare. Hell, there have been times in my adult life that I probably could have benefited from food stamps. But we don't even like to talk about it because of the stigma that surrounds it. But if we don't ever start talking about it, we'll never start seeing how common these needs are. And if we never start seeing how common these needs are, then we'll always be pretending as though we have when we actually have not. And we'll be doing ourselves a disservice. We, on 100%, have to push back against the stigma of people who need help from the government, because at some point, most of us are going to go through a period in life where we actually do need that help.
Do you believe that Brown versus Board of Education was correctly decided?
Senator, I don't mean to be coy, but I think I get into a difficult area when I start commenting on Supreme Court decisions, which are correctly decided and which I may disagree with. Again, my personal political or religious views I would set aside. That is Supreme Court precedent. It is binding. If I were honored to be confirmed, I would be bound by it, and of course I would uphold it.
Do you believe it was correctly decided?
And again, I will respectfully not comment on what could be my boss's ruling, the Supreme Court. I would be bound by it, and if I start commenting on I agree with this case or don't agree with this case, I think we get into a slippery slope.
I had to pause and check my watch and see what year this was. 2018 or 1958? How difficult is it to say, yes, I agree that schools should be integrated? But Wendy-Vitter, who is Donald Trump's nominee for a federal judgeship, she is attempting to become the United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Louisiana. I was going to say how fitting because Louisiana, but yeah, I'm not going to play Louisiana like that. Not all of Louisiana is as close-minded as it appears Wendy-Vitter is. But again, she's from New Orleans, and she is married to the former Senator David Vitter, who is now a current lobbyist. But she's Donald Trump's pick. And she cannot state whether or not she agrees with Brown versus the Board of Education. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, Brown versus the Board of Education is one of the pivotal decisions that in the civil rights movement that said that schools that are separate are inherently unequal. This was a unanimous decision sent down from the Supreme Court that most people have no problem saying, I agree with. I seriously wonder what world does this woman come from, does this individual come from, in which she can't firmly state that she supports the integration of schools. Of course, one detail I didn't mention is that she's part of the Republican Party. That should be neither here nor there. I mean, because for the love of, I mean, the last person, okay, there's some libertarian types. Barry Goldwater definitely opposed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act of 64 and 65. I can't remember off the top of my head what he believed in terms of Brown versus the Board of Education, but I'm going to take a stab at it and believe that because he feels that the federal government should not be infringing on the state governments, that he would disagree with that also. So perhaps that's the world that she comes from. Maybe she's more libertarian than she is Republican. But either way it goes, this is 2018. This is an open and shut case. This is a no-brainer. But it became an issue for her where are we? Well, I mean, what are we even doing here? This is madness. There's nothing else to say about this one. So the last story I was going to talk about was about a video that was posted on Twitter of a Donald Trump supporter using David Hogg's image as target practice. And I was going to play the audio for you because he went on a, kind of a deranged rant about wanting a civil war, and this is what a civil war was going to look like and all these things. And then all of a sudden he started shooting at a David Hogg image. Well, that video has been taken down and I can't get the audio from it, and Twitter has suspended his account. So what I will do is morph this into the conversation about censorship and free speech absolutism. Because it's always a good day to slam dunk on people who feel like free speech is so absolute that it should include ridiculousness like that. Right. And that don't even understand the nuances of the reality that we don't have free speech with corporations. We never did. We only have it with the government. And how we've extended and perverted that concept to platform people whose ideas are inherently insidious and inherently dangerous to marginalized groups. Now, David Hogg is not a part of a marginalized group, but the concept is still the same. Here's an individual, a Donald Trump supporter who wanted to become famous and use social media as a means of getting out his violent message to David Hogg. And he's been silenced. Now, I doubt very seriously that you're going to have people who are going to defend this guy. I haven't taken the time to check to see. I don't even know his account name anymore because it's all been deleted. But I'll do a little research and see, are there actually people who are going to defend this guy's right to I guess it's some type of weird intersection between the First Amendment and Second Amendment to send this message to David Hogg? I'm sure someone is going to defend that. But it just goes to show you that here's the reality. The reality of it is that the right in this country will always use free speech, a perverted definition of the First Amendment and a perverted definition of the Second Amendment, to forward their political agenda. And those people who believe that the First Amendment is applicable even to corporations, or even with dangerously and inherently dangerous speech, are going to be complicit with their agenda, which at the natural culmination of their agenda is really something along the lines of ethnic cleansing and political ideological cleansing. Right? I read this ridiculous piece in the National Review by Ben Shapiro, and his fear is that, and I'll put the link in the description, his fear is that the left is closing the Overton window and excluding people with dissenting views. No, we're just excluding people with inherently violent views that, if allowed to fester and grow and go unchallenged, would lead to the deaths of millions of people, or to the displacement of millions of people. And I think if you're an advocate for rational discourse, then how do you define rational? Is rational anything someone says that's presented in a calm sounding tone? Even if what they're saying means the destruction of entire groups of people, the displacement of entire groups of people, the supremacy of one particular race, or in Ben Shapiro's articles since, the advocacy of the death penalty for women who get abortions. And that's literally in the piece. I don't want to go into any other details. I'll put the link in the description. But where are we going with this? And what it is actually, they know this is a part of their plan. This is a part of their calculus. This cry for help against the big bad left, who won't let us organize Nazis, or who won't let us go to universities to discuss the virtues of denying the Holocaust. Really strange intersection there for Ben Shapiro, but I digress. This is a part of their calculus. This is a part of their agenda for their political agenda by saying and crying that no one is letting them talk about the exact things that they are talking about. Or saying the Overton window is shifting towards the left, when in reality, the Overton window is so far skewed to the left that you have Richard Spencer on mainstream television when you don't have Louis Farrakhan on mainstream television. I'm referencing again Ben Shapiro's article, who drew a direct line between between Richard Spencer's extremism and Louis Farrakhan's extremism, but which one of them had entire features done on them on national television. So this is a part of their calculus, right? This is a part of their toolkit. The way you extend the Overton window further and further to the right is by pretending as though it's going to the left, when in reality, it hasn't shifted to the left. We can barely talk about socialism in the public square without people attacking us. And in some ways, I'm employing the same technique that they use. We can talk about socialism. But if the tool works good for them, then far be it from me not to use the same tool. But there are limits to our speech. There should be limits to our speech. Maybe not from the federal government, but amongst a civilized society. We can determine what type of language, what type of speech is acceptable in the public square. We don't need the federal government to do that, because we as a collective body politic, we're capable of implementing our own types of societal punishments for people who think that it is virtuous to get on the internet and shoot up an image of a teenager who survived a shooting massacre at his high school in order to advance his own personal career. I think we can all agree to that. And if we can't, well, that's what the internet is for. We'll argue about it there. That's all the time I have for you today. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Thanks so much to all of our patrons. We can't do it without you. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron today. We're building a new studio. We're working out the kinks. We're going to bring back video. We're doing it. And we can't do it without you. www.patreon.com. You've been thinking about it. You literally have. I know you have. And you've been wondering when the best time is now. Well, I just answered it. The best time is now. Patreon.com/the BPD show. See you all tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.